All right, we have Mark Farley with us today of Thermo Fisher Scientific. And what we're going to be talking about is we are going to be walking through some of the lessons that Mark has learned throughout his career in the technology industry. So, Mark, let's just go ahead and kick things off. Tell me a little bit about your journey to where you are right now in your career.
Well, a little bit of everything, I think, over time in my
Hmm.
career, right? I started off in my college days, really building up what I'd call a mini startup in terms of a new outreach service for the university, effectively an ISP, but back in the era when people were still sitting around floppy disks and stuff to get connected to the internet. I went from there to do much more high tech with a company called Sequent, which is now part of IBM, specializing in very high performance compute system and leading crazy projects there like the year 2000 efforts from way back in the day. Took a job through consulting with EDS, focused on service delivery and in the Pacific Northwest. And then got a call from a company called FEI where some of my old colleagues had gone, and they said, you should come check this out, right? They're making electron microscopes and doing really cool stuff. And then I decided, well, let's go see. And was sold from the get-go when when we were looking at fields of atoms and such in the microscopes, which is super cool, ultra high tech.
It's
You
hard for
know,
that to not feel really cool.
yeah. And then you get into the discussions about what we're doing for semiconductor, for life
Mhm.
sciences, material sciences and such. So I started there, and that brought me into my journey today with Thermo Fisher as it was acquired a number of years ago. And I've been in the life sciences world, working in a very large industry at this point.
Mhm. Outstanding. I've always found that when you look at someone's career path, sometimes it can feel like it was a progressive direction. Looking at my career path, there are a lot of twists and turns that I will be very clear. I did not exactly know where it was going to go at the time.
Yeah, no question. And I get that question a lot from people, especially if I'm doing
Yep.
mentoring work or something else, right? There's been nothing linear about anything that I've done. I've always had goals for my career and some things I wanted to go accomplish and things that I enjoy doing. Some of these connections just sort of happened, and some of them are very deliberate. Work with each.
I think this is a good segue to talk me through some of the times when you've encountered some setbacks because we're talking about some of these bends in the road. I know
Yeah.
I've gone through a number of those myself, and I'd love to hear what you encountered and what doors you noticed opened when other ones closed.
I think probably the most embarrassing one was that I got.
Hey, you said that, not me.
This was not the highlight of how I really want to do business, but I had an opportunity to lead a much larger account when I was consulting. And, I've gone through the process. I was selected and through a variety of personal and other interactions, right? It just became clear that this was probably not the right move for me at that
Yeah.
particular stage in my life. So it was really hard, right? Because I knew a lot of the people, they'd put a lot of trust in me, and I had to make a difficult decision on that one. Of course, we do that you land on the bench, right? And
Yeah.
on the bench for very long. And, I had a few days of some very long soul searching in that. This is a credit to all of the leaders at the time. They managed to find me another position within that time frame with a good scope of responsibility. And I took that and really ran with it to the greatest degree that I could. I think we did a lot of great things and everything else, but um, it highlighted to me, it kind of reinforced that if you take care of your stakeholders, your team, your customer, those will pay themselves back to you in that. I also took away that I need to consider more than just career advancement in the work that I was doing. You got to look at the whole picture, but I really am grateful to all the folks who helped me through that one. There were a lot of ways that I could have gone otherwise at the time. I was expecting to be unemployed, and what I got was a very meaningful set of experiences and did my best to give back to the teams that supported me.
A couple of things I want to unpack a little bit there. For anybody who's listening and is unfamiliar with the notion of the bench in consulting, is that's a euphemism for saying that you are not earning money for the company because you're not billing out to a client. So depending on the type of agency you're working for, being on the bench for too long, that bench can slide out the door to being unemployed very easily. One of the things that at least that I've found is that, when you're going through difficult types of situations like that, do a lot of soul searching. And I think that sometimes that introspecting doesn't happen quite as much when you're in the normal day-to-day hustle and bustle.
Absolutely. You take stock of what really matters, and the people you know and the community that you have in those circumstances. And you work to emerge stronger from it. As we were talking about a minute ago, I don't have a linear theory on my career, right?
Yeah,
I still could be successful and made it down the road. It was really the relationships that I built and the work that I'd done that are
completely agree. Let's take a little bit of a turn now because, of course, you're VP of technology at Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is a rather large enterprise. So tell me some of the lessons you've learned from being in that technology role at a big enterprise company.
my role here is as vice president for information technology for part of the business known as analytical instruments. You won't be surprised to learn that we make analytical instruments. Things like the microscopy components and such from my background fit into that portfolio. I've worked across a lot of different sizes of organizations through my time, everything from effectively startup sized organizations where we were scraping every penny that we could to make it work and grow our user base customers to very large organizations like EDS and now Thermo Fisher. What I find is that each has their own flavor and their own means. Thermo Fisher is an amazing company, very much mission driven, and I'm very proud to be able to work for them. If I think about the larger organizations, I'm always impressed by the depth of capabilities across the organization. I learn something new every day. There's no possible way that I could know everything that was going on in any given time. It's about how do you build the network of people? How do you manage the change within the organization to really drive to the outcomes and hit your customers'
Yeah,
expectations in there, right? So, spending the time to nurture that and to make sure you have the right pieces is critically important, right? The technology components are table stakes. As an example, you're integrating FEI into Thermo Fisher. When I was working with our services organization on a number of digital initiatives that we were thinking about, and I made the decision to spend about a fifth of the week really on just meeting different people that were kind of in my extended network. It had connections to some of this work, or I thought would have connections to some of this work, and just to talk to those folks. And some accepted the meeting, some didn't. But at the end of it, I learned an incredible amount. It gave me this huge perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise had. I still use those connections through today for a lot of the work that we're doing more broadly beyond the service organizations and across the organization to help drive our mission and
hmm
fulfill our customers' needs. So that's been super helpful. It's been true everywhere that I've ever been and in all of the work that I've ever done.
out of curiosity, since I think there's a tendency to say if you're going to execute a strategy like that, which I think is genius, but there's a tendency to want to do all of that through Zoom meetings. I'm curious, did you do most of your networking virtually? Was there a mix with on-site, or was this from back in the before times when people worked at the same place?
All of the above, I think, is the answer, right? When you're dealing with an organization with global reach, certain amount of virtual meetings we did, and I took advantage of those, was traveling fairly frequently prior to COVID. So whenever I was at a given site where I had stakeholders, I would try and meet up with them in person. If there's someone locally, we'd try and connect. But I probably about 50% were remote meetings just because that was the only possibility to schedule within a reasonable period of time. And it tends to have some convenience factor,
Yeah,
especially when you're looking to learn from the person that you're contacting. You make it as easy as possible.
that makes sense. I think that's aspiring too, because if you're talking at least 50% virtual, that means pretty much anybody can execute the strategy.
Weirdly, it was as simple as just making a basic stakeholder map and starting to think through who was connected to who and what their interests would be. And if they intersected with some of the work that I was charged to go do, then for a logical reason to have a conversation, I did a lot more listening than I did talking in all of those meetings. How does each person look at the various scenarios that we were pursuing, which had a lot to do with how do we make our products more robust and give our customers better value for our services, which helped me down the road because I was able to get myself into their shoes and try and consider things from different perspectives.
Completely makes sense. I especially like that part about listen more than you talk. I think the way to get the most out of networking with people is to just really listen to what they have to say. Definitely how you'll learn.
I'm not always perfect
Yeah.
in that regard, but particularly with leadership roles, it's easy to jump in because you have something that you think is valuable to offer,
Yeah.
but it can derail a whole discussion at the same time. So being purposeful and mindful of that and trying to make sure that everybody gets a say in each discussion is equally important to me because we've got a lot of great minds.
That completely makes sense. All right. Tell me about what are some of the results or things you've been able to achieve in your career that you are the most proud of?
Mm. That's a great question, but it's hard, right? I tend to put it in the perspective of things we've either helped our teams or we really helped our customers. So,
Yeah.
if you kind of go back to the very beginning, right, working with Oregon State, you're trying to set up, community outreach work. So the more people that we connected with, the better that was going. It was very much a case of starting from core of about 20 invested stakeholders and then moving that up to a couple thousand people and then ultimately spinning it off of the university, right?
Hmm.
That took a lot of grit and determination by everybody. And we made a good difference to the community. And it was a good example of where the university was really giving back to their community. We had some fairly difficult issues with some of the work that we were doing with the global IT teams. And it's a lot of time working on how do we integrate those teams? How do we build trust across the different regions, to the point where in a roughly 3-week period, we picked up the family and moved to the Netherlands for a while and tried to work from the other lens. Really proud of what the team was able to accomplish after that. I mean, we built a really strong team with great people and they went on to do some incredible work for the company. And it really speaks well for everyone. It came from a difficult place, but we emerged much stronger. A lot of the work that I'm doing today, which I really enjoy doing, is about digital transformation. And I'm fortunate and often humbled to be working inside of Thermo Fisher because we have such a breadth of capabilities across the different life sciences and industrial capabilities that we have. I mean, it's mind blowing. I learn about something new that we do. The ability to connect that to a mission of a company, Thermo Fisher, is amazing. And it's something that as I said, I'm both humbled and proud to be able to make a contribution there and
Uh-huh.
really help fulfill the mission of the company.
Kind of like this thread of conversation because what you're really telling me about was the importance of really developing teams and people. Tell me a little bit about what have you found to be most effective?
A lot of it comes back to some basic values that I have. I'm only successful in the work that I do because of the rest of the people in the organization. That has to always be in balance. And you need to make sure that if you're in a leadership position, you're helping to develop the people in your organization, that you take proper care and attention to what they need in order to be successful. I try to employ a good amount of listening to speaking.
Okay, let me one last question then. Is there something I should have asked but didn't? Are there any questions that I left on the table?
I'm curious. I've done a lot of these interviews over
Yeah,
time. What's the biggest learning that you've taken away?
that's a really good question. The thing that I've observed is that the techniques are not nearly as important as the mindset because everybody I've had conversations with who are effective leaders, they really have that people first value mindset. I believe you can apply that mindset to just about any tool set and get to where you need to go.
Interesting. There are particular sort of common qualities that you find in there or techniques that people apply.
One of the things I've found is that people who end up being in leadership capacities, they are almost always very capable people. The problem is that if you are capable, you know you're capable, and you haven't run into any ditches or pits for a number of years, you can get a little bit of an elevated sense of yourself. I think that some of the best leaders come from when they've been knocked down and had to get back up because that helps to instill some of that humility that you really need in order to have that next level of empathy with your team. Otherwise, it's really easy to be a whip cracker but it's a lot harder to really lead from a genuine perspective. And I think some of that just comes from genuine bruises.
Personally, I'm a big fan of leading from the front
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
You need to be out there out with
That,
the team.
that's one of the things I've always thought would be an interesting interview question, because a lot of times, like, tell me about one of your biggest accomplishments. And I would almost say, ask the anti question, right? Tell me about the biggest blunder you were ever a part of. What were you thinking at the time? And what did you learn
Yeah,
from it?
I think there's lots to be learned from what didn't go well. In order to do that, you have to be willing to take on some endeavors that don't
Well,
succeed.
if you know it's going to work, you're not taking a risk. Right.
It's equal parts. Run the playbooks that you know work so that you
Hmm.
can help support and grow your business, take care of your customer. And then on the innovation front, there's a lot of experimentation. Not all of my crazy ideas have worked out the way that I was hoping that they would.
Exactly. All right, Mark, this has been a lot of fun. Give us your last one or two thoughts, and then let everybody know where you're most active on social media.
I'm not sure I have a lot of additional wisdom to share beyond kind of what we've discussed today. You can usually find me on LinkedIn, your best bet from a professional standpoint.
Hey, Mark, really, really appreciate your time today.